It's your homework. It's your final project. So you guys have to write your your Battleship problem, right? The first thing that we should kind of describe is the structure of our class, right? So we want to be able to play a game of Battleship. So a game of Battleship, and the first thing that we should ask ourselves is, what is a game of Battleship made up of? And when we have these has-of relationships, what do they mean? What does that mean if something has a something else? If X has a Y? If X has a Y, then Y is not a friend of X, a member of X, right? If you are made up of something, it's going to be one of your members. Does that make sense? So let's increase the size. So what is a game of Battleship made up of? Players. Depending on how you would like to do it, a board maybe. Yeah. Like, okay, so players take turns placing ships on a grid of spaces, or the players secretly place ships on a grid of spaces. Then they take turns calling out spaces to shoot at. If you hit somebody, they say hit. If they miss the opponent, you say miss. If it fully destroys your ship, because they have a certain amount of health, then it's destroyed. You keep shooting at each other until somebody blows up all the other players' ships. Anything else that we want our game to be made up of? Okay. Yeah. We may have like a current turn. But again, we're just like thinking high level. But like if you think about it, this is what it's made up of, probably. Can't really think of too many other things. Well, what are your players made up of? They have a name. So players have a name. The players have... What do you mean that type? Well, that's like a human player is a player, right? So you don't want to have types to check what type you are, because if you have an is a relationship, you should be using inheritance, right? So you can say maybe that a player has ships, right? Because each player has their own separate set of ships, right? And it might make more sense for each player to have ships than for the game of Battleship to directly have those ships. Does that make sense? What? You can't, so you're saying the game of Battleship has a player reference?
Oh, I'm saying, Battleship has a reference.
But each player has their own set of ships, right? Like if I shoot your battleship and you haven't shot my battleship, do we want to be shooting at the same set of ships? No, right? Each player has their own distinct set of ships to be able to distinguish between the two. So probably not want this to be here. Do players have anything else? Each player has their own separate board, right? Like I have a board where I place my ships, you have a board where you place your ships. So a player probably has a board, right? A board where they place their ships. Does a player have anything else? What? Well, does a player have health, or do their ships have health, or if the player has health? I mean, it could be done where a player has health and the player's health is the combined sum of all of their ships' healths, right? But that would be more like an attribute you could. It depends on how you want to do it. could have it as the player has health, or you could say that their ships have health. So that would be like your particular implementation, whether the players have health or the ships have health, and you can calculate the player's health from their ship's health. Anything else you want your players to have or be made up of? Well, are players made up of moves? Well, yeah, they're not allowed to do that, right? And I guess technically you could have a list of locations the player has fired at if you wanted to verify that you can't shoot there again. You could also just look at their board and say, oh, hey, is there a marker here? Right, that also works. So you could do this. It depends on your implementation. So list of locations fired at is a possibility. So again, like, you could say like a game of Battleship is made up of moves, right? But do you want to keep track of the list of all the moves the player has made? No, right? You just want to get a move from the player and then like make the move. So again, it's probably not a member of the class because you're not made up of it. But you may need to, as you're playing the game, like in a function, right? You might need to get a move to be able to do something. But it might be either a local variable, right? You just need it for that function, and you're able to generate the value of that move inside the function. Or if you're not, and that value needs to come from somewhere else, right? It's just going to be an argument to the function that when you call it, you give it the thing, right? For example, like if I want to be able to mark the location that a player is fired at on the board, I have to give the board where it's been shot at, and it can go set the piece to be whatever. Right? So like those are like the 4 questions like you have when it comes to like a class, right? Like does X have a Y? If X has a Y, then Y is a member of X. If you can say X is a Y, right? Then X inherits from Y. Right? If you can say, well, I need this thing, but I just need it inside this function, then it's a local variable or argument. And if it's going to come from somewhere else, it's an argument. If it's not coming from somewhere else that needs to be passed in, it's going to be a local variable. That's how you can kind of distinguish between like the 4 things you should do. I guess the final thing would be like, should it be a static member? That should be shared across all classes. An example of a static member for the AIs is their random number generator is shared across all AIs. Any other questions? Yeah. So it is possible, depending on how you have your game, where you only need 2 boards and you just display them differently depending on what you want to put onto the screen. Or you could have each player has 2 boards, and one for shooting at and one for being, placing their ships at and being shot at. Depends on how you want to do it. So there could be a board, 1 or 2, right? If 2, then you have a firing board and a placement board. If 1, then just display differently. So, yeah. No. Well, yeah, the output shows you what it's supposed to be, but like the implementation is up to you, right? The reason like programming is hard and you get paid lots of money to do it is because you have to figure out how to solve problems, right? No one's going to give you a roadmap for how to get to the end. It's up to you to come up with that. Yeah, you're free to display stuff. If you look at the project, you're basically given nothing, and you're creating it from scratch.
Okay, so you don't have like.
I am testing against your output. Your output needs to match mine. It's like I gave you like a box of Legos. I'm like, here's the picture I want you to build. Make this. Right? The picture needs to look at the same at the end. So now you have some other things like we can see that we have like a ship. What's a ship made up of? Like, its size, its symbol. You could potentially have a position. I can't think of anything else for a ship, right? That would be covered under position, right? Because if you had a position, like my ship is from here to here, you could distinguish its orientation, right? If it's vertical, it'll be in the same column. If it's horizontal, it'll be in the same row. Or like a start point and end point, right? Like that's where its position would be at. Like where does it start at? Where does it end at? Because it has to be contiguous. We've kind of done boards before, so it should be kind of like cool on what a board is. But yeah. Well, if you look at the assignment, it tells you how to do it. You should make 3 separate AIs. Yes, because you can't do that, and it tells you how to do that. You generate a list of all the possible locations to shoot at. You randomly pick one, you shoot at that location, and you remove that element from the list. Then you pick again for the next one. Right? That ensures that you don't multiply fire at the same time, the same spot, because it's been removed from the list of possible locations to shoot at. Some other things, right? We do have different types of players, right? So we have something like a human player, right? And a human player is a player, so it should inherit from player. I'm not sure that there are any like new members that need to be in this class, right? But there are going to probably need to be some methods you override, because all we've talked about is like what things are made up of, not how things should technically like be struck, like how things should run. So it is a player, right? You have AI players. They are players, right? You might have a random AI. What is it? Not a player, but an AI player, right? You might have a hunt destroy AI. It is an AI player, right? You might have a cheating AI. It's a AI player, right? So the things that are similar between all of the AIs, right? You can collect in the AI player class and then just have your AIs inherit from that class to be able to do the different things they need to do for their particular shooting, right? They're all going to place the ships identically, right? But they will shoot differently. Right? Board we've kind of already talked about before, but the next thing would kind of be to like structure like how you want to like write your program. So again, you want to start at high level. What do you want to be able to do for your program? What do you want to be able to do at a high level for a game of Battleship? You want to be able to play it, right? Fantastic. Right? Anything else you want to do from the outside of the game besides play it? Create it, set it up. So you might have something like, create/set up. Anything else you'd want to do from the, at a high level with the game of Battleship? That comes under playing the game, right? Great. So we have yeah. Again, that's involved in playing the game, right? So there probably are like 2 public methods on this entire class, like at most, like setting up the game, playing the game, and of course constructors as well, right? So maybe 3 things. So when you want to play a game of Battleship, what do you do? Yeah, so the first thing would be like that depends. That might be like under like the setup, right? So like in the setting up the game, right, we need to read the configuration file. Right? After we read the configuration file, well, yes, I'm assuming like the configuration files on the command line, right? You'd also need to like seed the random number generator, you know. Seed the random number generator. Need to be done here too. Right, so you know, for each player, get its type, right? And then, you know, set up that player, you know, say, you know, have that player place their ships. Anything else you need to do to get set up? Again, at a high level, or like, we shouldn't be talking about like constructors or destructors or anything like that. I mean, so that there might need to be like some displaying along the way to make this happen in between, but aside from that, man, this seems good to me, right? Like, what else really needs to be done? But again, you've come up with some more problems that indeed need to be solved. For playing the game, though, again, think high level. What? Did the player already place their ships? What? Yeah, we keep doing something over and over and over again. How long do we keep doing it? Right? So, like, while the game isn't over, what do? Yeah, you know, you get the current player's move. So we got this current player's move. Well, okay, you know, get a valid move from the current player. Okay. What do you mean by change the board? If we're going to display it, you might like display the game state up here or something. And so again, we're saying for to like change the board. Right, I mean, so after we get the move, we make the move, updating the game state. Right, that's what making the move is. You have to make the move, update the game state based on what they said they wanted to do. Then, okay, you know, display updated game. Depending on how you do things, you might not need this because you'd wrap back around, and what you would do, you would display the current game state, and it would be it'd be like the new version. So, you know, this might not need to be here. And then, yeah, change the turn. Does this sound familiar at all? It's the exact same thing, right? As tic-tac-toe, it's the exact same thing as Connect-N, right? Any turn-based game has this exact same structure, right? The only things that are going to be changing are the details inside of it, right? What does it mean to get a move, right? What does it mean to make that move? Those things change, but the overall way that games are played hasn't changed if you view it from a very high level, right? And then we might, you know, afterwards display the winner because somebody always has to win a game of Battleship, right? But again, you've broken it down to more problems, right? What does it mean for the game to be over? All the ships are sunk? Yeah, right? If all of the ships that one player has are sunk, right, than the game, right? You just have to be very specific about what you say, because the computer will be like, okay, all the ships are sunk, and that's never gonna like, that would mean like everybody has to get blown up, and then it wouldn't quite work. But yeah, you know, you might be like, hey, ask the player, hey, do you have any ships left? If you do, we keep playing, right? The game's not over. If the player doesn't have any ships left, the game is over. Right? But does this make sense? Do you have any questions about like any of these particular parts? Yeah. I would recommend having something like this. Player at the top, human and AI both inherit from it. And then AI has like the random, the cheating, and the hunt destroy that inherits from it, because they're a little bit distinct. And you could probably get it to work where the AI inherits from the human, but the things that, like, you wouldn't be able to use anything useful from the human, because you need to be set up very differently than the way that humans are set up, and like the way that you make a move, which is basically the distinguishing feature. Okay, say, what's the distinguishing feature between humans and AIs at the highest level? Like, what's different between the two? The way they move, right? And names would be different, and yeah, the way that they generate the positions to shoot at, right? They generate moves differently, right? So like those are the three distinctions between humans and AIs. Now, what's the difference between each of these different types of AIs? The way they make their moves, right? The way they generate the moves. That's the only thing that's different. So everything that's the same can be collected up here in the parent AI class, and you don't have to keep re-implementing it in the children, because the children can just inherit from the parent and then just reuse that code. But the things that they need to do different, namely like making the moves, they can override from the parent. Now, let's say you had a get move method inside the player. Would it be a pure virtual method, or would it have an implementation? Pure virtual, right? So this is going to make player a what? An abstract class, right? Because it cannot be implemented, right? So in human, is this get move going to be a pure virtual method, or will there be an implementation of it? There'll be an implementation. In AI, will it be a pure virtual method, or will there be an implementation of get move? Pure virtual. So AI is also a abstract class. In each of these ones down here, will there be an implementation, or will it be pure virtual? There'll be an implementation down there, right? So some other things to think about: players, right? What's in C++, what's the type of players going to be, right? Because we have multiple players. Well, I mean, player is a class, right? But you're going to have multiple players in your game, right? Almost a vector of, cannot have a vector of player, because you just said player is an abstract class. You can have a vector of player pointers, but would be better than having a vector of player pointers. You cannot have vectors of references. Yeah, a vector of unique pointers to players. right? The reason why the unique pointers are going to be better than using the raw pointers is because if you use the raw pointers, you will be responsible for dynamically allocating the space for each player, and then in the destructor, freeing that space, right? Because whatever you create, you must destroy, right? But if you have unique players, you create the space. When the pointer goes away, the space that it points to will automatically be deleted. So a vector of unique pointers to players of player is how you want to make this work. Any function that wants to be receiving a player has to receive now like a player reference, right? Because again, you can't pass around just player as like copies of player because you don't know. Well, one, you can't have an instance of a player, it's abstract. And two, right, you want a player reference because that reference might be referring to a cheating AI, or it might be referring to a hunt destroy AI, or it might be referring to a human player, but you don't know. Those things that you want all players to be able to do, where should those methods be defined at? Yeah, in player, right? And if it doesn't make sense for the player to provide an implementation, that method should be pure virtual, right? If it doesn't make sense for the AI or for that class to provide an implementation, but it still makes sense for that thing to exist, it needs to be pure virtual. So, for example, get move needs to be pure virtual, right? Up here in player, right? Because you want the ability to get a move from every single type of player, right? What other things might you want all players to be able to do? They might want them to be able to like configure or set their name, right? So you need to be able to like get the name from the AI to be like AI1 or AI2, or get the name from the human to be whatever they tell you it's supposed to be. What else might you want all players to be able to do? Well, they're not responsible for changing their turn, right? Like the player's not keeping track of whose turn it is. The overall like game is, the game of Battleship is. What? Well, like if you have move.make, right? So like, yeah, we want to like getting their move, which we already said needs to be done for all different types of players. But like making the move probably does not need to be, right? Because again, that's not even a method defined inside the player class, right? Probably like move.make is defined inside move, right? Some other things that you might want, how about placing the ships? You want all players to be able to place ships on the board? Yeah, right? You want all players to be able to do that, but do all players place their ships the same way? No, right? Humans play ships differently than the AIs place the ships, right? But this allows you to have that same sort of interface. So we're done for today, and I will see you guys in class on Wednesday. We'll talk about CMake then.